Here we go. All right. This is Craig LeBlanc with the Bitcoin Daily. I'm with Rob Wallace, Bitcoin News co-founder. We're doing an interview with him. Thank you, Rob, for coming on. Again, I'm one of 12 hosts that work with the Bitcoin Daily. We put on a show 8 to 12 every day for approaching 300 straight days. Each show is different, so it's usually focused on Bitcoin of some sort, and we meet a lot of great people through X. We meet a lot of great people on stage, and sometimes we just want to highlight their story and find out about where they came from, where they are, where they're going. Rob was one of these guys that I met early on in the Bitcoin Daily, and he's obviously got a really good thing going just by capturing that name, Bitcoin News. What a win there. So maybe we can start there. How in the world did you get that?
Yeah, so bitcoinnews.com was originally purchased as a domain back in, I think, 2016, 2017. And so, yeah, it was somewhere offshore, not in America. They were running this website, putting out a lot of content about crypto, though. It wasn't Bitcoin specific. So it had its run during the 2017, 2018 bull run, and then sort of faded off. This German fellow, Leon, he purchased the domain back in like end of 2021, 22, and he made it Bitcoin only, cleared out the past, and made it very Bitcoin focused. I joined on at the end of 22, beginning of 23 as a video editor, head of video. And as time went on, eventually took on more responsibilities and took it over with my fellow co-founder back in September. So yeah, he and I have been running it for almost a year now, and it's been a lot of fun. Been able to use my talents from my past and bring it together with my passion of Bitcoin, and it's a joy to wake up every day and spread the gospel, as you know.
Man, I know. I'm envious. I'm trying to catch up so that we can have a lot of guys, a lot of big brands up there just trying to push out. I feel like there's so much blue ocean. We're like two little pontoons in the Pacific Ocean trying to bring Bitcoin to the masses. But I appreciate you leading the charge. You were one of my guys that kind of inspired me to just go do something. I mean, gosh, we need all hands on deck to get this content out. There's a lot of education that goes on. Y'all write some great articles. So tell me about the makeup of the company. How do y'all produce content? What do y'all look for? How big is your team? Maybe we can start there.
Yeah, so we've got around 10 to 11 people around the world, right? We've got a designer in Thailand, a editor in Iran, a Twitter guy that I work with in Italy. Juan Galt is in Colombia. He's our podcast or Spaces host on Fridays. So, I mean, we're an international team, right? And that's one amazing thing about Bitcoin is that you can find people from around the world who are driven and passionate about this mission and, willing to sacrifice and work hard on something that's a startup that's brand new just to, again, as I said, spread the word, right? Spread the passion and make sure that people know that there's a monetary revolution going on that has the ability to change the world.
And so maybe define what's y'all's mission, vision? Do y'all have that kind of written concisely?
Yeah, so the vision changes over time, right? You as an entrepreneur, you got to just iterate, try things, get out in the market, see what works, see what doesn't, and keep on moving, right? At the same time, you got to produce revenue in order to keep the lights on and make sure that you're a functioning, viable business. So last year, the focus was a lot more on the website and editorial. We revamped the website, made that live. And but then crazy enough, I mean, Google had this big change back in the spring in March, April, right? And they're just like, sites, huge sites, big sites like the Thrillist and whatnot were just getting wrecked when it came to organic traffic, right? So that happened to us, and it's like, okay, now we got to pivot. We got to figure out what we're doing. So one thing that we've had success with, of course, over the last year was Twitter. I've been growing that on a daily basis. Of course, I'm leading the charge over there. And in terms of getting out the news nowadays, people want headlines, right? People want tidbits. It's very like people aren't spending time reading articles that much, right? Unless it's a in-depth piece, a investigative report, stuff like that. More higher end journalism definitely still, of course, is valuable. But in terms of the news, it's commodified. So reporting on the latest happenings with JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon Trump saying that he likes Bitcoin now. I mean, that's a headline, and a lot of that, it's changing so much with AI and whatnot. So we still, of course, we have bitcoinnews.com. We put out daily editorial, and you'll be able to find articles there. But the focus now that we have on, of course, is growing the Twitter, growing the audience, making sure that millions of eyeballs every single month see Bitcoin content, know that what Bitcoin mining is, seeing it changing the world. But also we want to focus on more high-end research type content as well. So we've got our newsletters. We got Bitcoin News Weekly, which is a news roundup. I think is a valuable resource that goes out every Monday morning. You can just see the biggest news developments in Bitcoin, so you don't need to spend hours a day on Twitter like I have to. And then we also have started Bitcoin Insights, which is our research newsletter that comes out on Fridays. And we're working with Sina of 21st Capital. He's a PhD data scientist with a mathematics and economics background. So we're developing models over there, like the volatility adjusted power law and things such as that. So we're going to be building out a website with charts and models so that really to give Bitcoiners and new people into the space the confidence to hodl, right? To not have to trade this stuff, but to know deep down, even if the market tanks 20% like it did last week, it's okay. The market's healthy. Like just being able to take a look behind the scenes of just the price and being able what's going on in the market and give you the confidence to hold on to the most scarce monetary asset known to man.
So it seems like y'all are truly trying to somewhat map on top of the old newspapers of old, except just in the new digital world where you're digging up the content, doing the homework, consolidating all the information that one might need to hodl or to be up to date on this week's news. Mm-hmm. Am I hitting that right? Or is there something in addition to that? Or
yeah, I mean, we want essentially we're a media company, right? So whether it's our YouTube with Luke Mikic, who's putting out live streams and interviews on a weekly basis, or the Twitter, the daily editorial, or the newsletters, we want to inform people, entertain people, and Bitcoin is a movement, right? And if there's not people out there who are spreading the energy, making sure that it is promoted and just evangelize, really, Bitcoin has a marketing team other than us. So we are extremely passionate about this, and it's a pleasure to wake up every single day and talk about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, y'all are doing great stuff. Definitely keep it going, because it's amazing the global phenomena that it is. I had an interview with a guy in Thailand, and he said there really is hardly any Bitcoin content being produced in their language for their people, but they had one convention, and within they had 400 seats for Bitcoin only, and in 1 hour completely sold out. And so they opened up for another 100 tickets. They had to do that 5 more times before they just could not fit any more people. And so as a global phenomenon, it's people are hungry for it. They're curious about it. And it's almost like the social layer and the content layer arm is just not big enough, developed enough. You can't get the content out there enough. I know sometimes in these echo chambers, we think everybody's into Bitcoin, but man, you step outside and start talking to the normal streetwalker and you realize this is super early.
Yeah.
There's
and
the room.
And being on Twitter and Nostr as much as I am, I get to see these different things pop up around the world, right? I mean, there's now a Bitcoin house in Chiang Mai, Thailand. There's a Bitcoin house in Bali, Indonesia, right? And so it's just these people who feel the need to, again, spread the word, but they're doing it physically, right? In a physical location. And they have some really cool places. Like the place in Bali is made out of a shipping container, right? And so it's bare bones, but they've got everything you need to run a meetup, provide Bitcoin education, sell some t-shirts, sell hardware wallets. And again, it's so cool to see these physical locations pop up around the world as well.
Yeah, so maybe tell me a little bit about the different mediums that y'all are in. Obviously, you've got the newsletter and you've got the Twitter feed, but tell me about your X Spaces, kind of what's the format there? When can we listen to it? I know it's on Fridays. Is it every Friday? What's the general format there? And then you mentioned something about, I didn't even realize y'all had a YouTube channel of interviews and stuff. Where can people find out more about that, and what's the strategy there?
Yeah. So on Fridays, usually at 11:30 a.m. Eastern, we do spaces with Juan. Juan's been in Bitcoin since about 2013 or so. He's very technically astute, and it's really cool. He has no fear of getting deep into the weeds, whether it's about covenants or ordinals or just like the latest things, BitVM. If there's a new technical development that comes out, we love to have the developers on our space and talk about what's going on here and try to make it understandable for the average Bitcoin pleb, right? Sometimes a lot of these conversations can go over my head, but I'm there, I'm hosting it, and I love just to be a part of it and absorb the technical jargon and try to get as much of a understanding of Bitcoin as possible. But yeah, we interview all different kinds of people in those spaces. Right now, Juan is traveling for the summer, so these last week and this week we have off, but next week we have a show coming up with a development team. Sorry, it slips my mind right now, but yeah, next Friday at 11:30 Eastern, you'll be able to find a space with Juan on our Twitters. And when it comes to YouTube, we've got Luke Mikic. So Luke is a YouTuber from Australia. He sold all his possessions back around 2017 and just purchased Bitcoin and was like living out of the back of a van, and has been all in Bitcoin for the last 6 years or so now. And he's extremely talented when it comes to interviewing people, being on camera. He does at least 2 live streams a week, and it usually comes on when there's some big news. He'll just throw in a camera after preparing for some charts and articles and whatnot, and talk to the audience for about a half hour on these live streams. And it's really fun. He interacts with the audience in the live chat and gives his unique view, and he's extremely bullish, right? Yeah, he's definitely one of those guys, and it's a lot of fun to hear his takes. And we do interviews too. So we're going to be in Nashville next week, of course, for the conference. We've got a nice hotel room where we're just going to be running interviews with different people in the Bitcoin space for the 3 or 4 days straight. Just try to pound out 4 or 5 interviews a day in that hotel room. So
Fantastic.
A lot of content coming out over there.
I think so that must Luke Mikic.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that was y'all. I see stuff on Bitcoin Spaces, or we created a group where it's a bunch of Bitcoin content creators, and anytime we create content, and he's on there like once or twice a day.
Yeah.
Man, that's so good. He does a great job.
Yeah. He joined the team this year. Since about February, he's been on board with us, and it's a great pleasure to have him on board. When you're building a media company like this, it's about the talent you surround yourself with, right? And I think that he's really a rising star over on YouTube. He's studied YouTube, right? From Mr. Beast to the finance YouTubers, he knows the ins and outs of what gets people to watch, what keeps them engaged. And that's pivotal when you're competing against, of course, tens of thousands, 100,000 of new videos a day on YouTube. How are you going to grab new people and bring them into Bitcoin in an engaging way? He's studied the art of YouTube and is helping Bitcoin news spread the word.
Yeah, it's really is. Each platform is its own kind of art form. I spoke to someone, Daniel. You may have heard of Bitcoin Gandalf.
Yeah.
So he came on the show, and he spent, according to him, nearly 10,000 hours mastering Twitter over 3 years. He was like putting in 3,000 hours a year, which is like 60 hours a week at a pace. And it's amazing how the level of mastery you can wield inside of like a Facebook, an X, a YouTube platform, and how these guys just operate on a whole nother level on what works, what gets the clicks, what to pay attention. And that is, like you said, that's what you're up against. When you produce content, you're competing for attention and eyeballs, and you're not just competing for attention to start watching. Like your first 10 seconds convinces him to watch the second 10 seconds and the third, and you've got to win all the way to the end of the show.
Yeah. Yeah.
it's quite an art form. So where do you think media is heading as far as, and I'll give you a little context. I feel like this live content, the live stuff on Spaces, the live stuff like we're doing here, I'm anticipating that the market might want a little more authentic, unscripted, unedited, because life is unedited. And they're getting, especially with AI, is just flooding the market with content, edited content that is starting to feel a little more unnatural and unreal. And I feel like there's going to be a part of humanity that just wants to engage, have a comment section, get up on stage like on X Spaces with speakers. That's my hunch. That's where my heart's pulling me. So where do you think media is heading, and people's what the content they want to consume is heading amidst all this just onslaught of endless content that AI, and just not even with AI, but just so many content producers before AI, and now AI is just making it even worse.
Yeah, I think the trend throughout the 2010s was just to get shorter and shorter and shorter, harder hits, quicker edits, more dopamine up front, and just try to bang, 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 right? And just try to rewire the brain to get you sort of addicted, right? And to get you hooked as quickly as possible. And I think that sort of content leaves people a lot to be desired, right? Because now you've got TikTok videos where you have a interview of somebody speaking, but you've got video game footage and you've got cooking footage, and it's all in one square, right? And I mean, you're just your brain's just being bombarded, sludge content, they call it. And that's one way to go, but I think you're right. I think that live is becoming extremely important. I mean, some of the biggest celebrities of this new generation are the live streamers, right? This guy, IShowSpeed, he was doing video game streams, and now he's out in real life streaming that. And I mean, he's got thousands, 10,000 kids following him around Europe as he's just going on vacation on this tour, right, around the country. And people want to feel a part of the content that they consume, right, to be able to comment and interact with the people who are on stage speaking is a huge part in Spaces, being able to come up on stage and talk to the people who are leading it. So yeah, I think interactive and long form too, right? I mean, I like to throw on a podcast or a video that's an hour plus and do it while I'm working out or walking or chores or whatever, it's really good to, and that's how you get of course, the deeper insights and figure out people's stories, and people want to relate to it, right? Instead of just getting those dopamine hits, bang, 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 bang. I think it's better to build a relationship with your audience, and live streaming and Spaces definitely allow you to do that.
Yeah, I think it's so hard. I don't even know if it's possible to create depth. And so we have all these super shallow relationships with our content creators or the content we choose to consume, or even we have a shallow relationship with the topic. But then you listen to like a Lex Friedman, where I would come in and watch 4-hour interview, and he would interview somebody I liked and another person I liked. But then before you know it, I started to like just Lex. I liked the way he thought. I liked his insightful questions. I liked the way he was curious, the way he was humble and readily admitted he didn't understand. And then I started to trust him as an interviewer and a researcher to pick problems apart that he didn't understand and help pull me deeper into the rabbit hole of the person he's interviewing. And these were like 3 or 4 hour this was nothing quick about it. It was nothing fancy. It was maybe he edited a little. I know he does edit some, but for the most part, it's just roll cameras just rolling.
Yeah.
Joe Rogan, same format. And so that was the kind of content creator I became, because I got tired of the shallow nature of what am I doing? Just 30-second content. I'm not. Maybe you get these top 10 lists of workouts or diet, and maybe you convince yourself they're useful. But after you've consumed 300 of these, are any of them useful when you've got 300 top 10 lists? But in the moment, you're like, oh, this is great information, but it's just overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So I was looking for that personal connection with my content creator and who they're interviewing, which I thought could only be done in that format
Yeah, and I think the one thing that you got, and the reason why you've been able to grow so quickly this year is you're a people person, right? And you genuinely care, and it's very obvious when, I mean, just that first half-hour conversation that we had, you know, that was probably what, January or so.
Yeah.
We just connected real quick on Twitter, and then we're on Telegram and just caught up for a quick phone call. But it was very obvious just from that little bit of talking with you that you are a genuine people person, that you really care about the people that you speak with, and that you're coming from a good place, and the audience can feel that and recognize it, and that's what builds you a long-term audience, and
Yeah.
they can trust you. And I think it's very clear in what you've done that you've been able to leverage that skill, that emotional intelligence that you have into what you're doing right now.
Yeah. And I think, and this is something that we're toying with the Bitcoin Daily is, you know, how do we, I think a lot of the hosts we have right now are in a similar vein that I am. They also care about obviously Bitcoin, but they care about their audience. They're very deep, insightful people. They're not very shallow. That's why we were attracted to each other. Then that's why they agreed. You know, of course I tried to convince them, but they have to say yes, and they agreed to host one of the shows. And I love all of the show hosts and all the shows. They're doing fantastic. And for the most part, I don't have anything to do with it besides getting on stage and chiming in now and then. But you know, I'd love to see our show go the direction of being a home for content creators to come create under the brand, as if almost like an incubator for content creators, that they can kind of leverage the big brand, but then at the same time, they have a lot of autonomy to create either in video, in news, in books, whatever. Just, I want to be a place where content creators just come and, you know, try to learn a little and maybe start creating, because it's kind of scary. I think a lot of people just don't want to jump. I mean, maybe you can take us back to what, because, well, help us understand where you came from, first of all, and then what caused you to jump into a media company. I don't know if your background had anything to do with what you're doing now.
Yeah, I mean, we can go back and do the whole orange pill story, and it all sort of leads into each other, and
yeah, I'd love that.
How we got here today. I mean, I think we can trace it back to 2008, 2009. I was a sophomore studying at Tufts University up in Boston, studying international relations and Chinese. I thought I was going to, I loved history, right? And so I thought that I wanted to work in the government in some regard. You know, I was always watching the History Channel, big World War II buff, and just thought that all that just led into, I don't know, maybe diplomacy or something like that. So I was studying Chinese, and I thought this was, of course, around the 2008 time when they had the Olympics and they were coming out onto the world stage as this superpower that could rival America. And there was a large question into the 2010s as to how the America and China would interact. But then I came home from a class one day and turn on the TV, and I see Hank Paulson, the Secretary of Treasury, get on TV and say, if we don't give the banks almost $1 trillion, then there's going to be martial law, right? We're going to have tanks on the street. And as soon as I heard that, I knew something was wrong fundamentally. And just my bullshit radar went up, and I was like, this is so something's wrong here. And that led me down the rabbit hole, right? I looked into the wars that were a huge part of my childhood, right? And realized that was built on a lie. And just the economic system in general was just the fiat system. It really has a few winners and a lot of people who have to pay for it. And handing out those bankers that.
Was that from a financial background of yours? Or were you just a general consumer like all of us during 2008 and saying, all right, something's not right?
Yeah, I was studying. I was taking a few economics classes right at the time, but I was more of a history, political science buff, and just trying to put the pieces together as to how the world works at the time and how we got there. And I realized, of course, the petrodollar and the fiat system was a lot of the decisions that were made in the preceding 10 years were built to prop up that system, right? From 9/11 to the wars to the financial crisis itself. Everything was made to make sure that the king dollar stay number one, and that the fiat system could continue. So yeah, I was completely disillusioned with the idea of, say, working for the government or being a part of the that machine. So I was studying Chinese and I studied abroad, and I went to Shanghai and fell in love with it. It felt like the capitalist system of say the late 1800s, early 1900s, right? You had an idea, you could go out and try it. There wasn't this red tape. You could just start a business. You had an idea, you could go to a factory and explain it to them and they could make something for you, right? I mean, it was just like you had the energy, and there was just this vibe. The cranes were up, the cities were booming, and of course, I mean, there's pollution and corruption and all the things that go along with China at the time. But it was a very vibrant place, and it was something that, say, New York in 2010 was completely lacking. New York felt very stuffy compared to a place like Shanghai, which was booming. So yeah, was there, and that's where I was able to explore all these different things. I worked for a magazine. I was the nightlife editor for a magazine. I threw events. I had a band, and I started my content creation career there. I started a comedy series called Donnie Does with a good friend of mine. We went to college together. He moved out to China a year after I was there, and the plot was, do you remember Borat? You remember
Yeah.
So you put on an act, right, and was interacting with real people in real life, and so that's what we did. Except for our actor was Donnie, and the story of Donnie was that he blacked out at the Logan Airport in Boston, and he woke up in Shanghai and needed to work his way back to America. So we did things like filming him teaching a kindergarten class, working in an amusement park, just doing all these crazy jobs that you could just do as a foreigner in China at that time, right? And of course, Facebook and YouTube and all these things were blocked, but if you had a VPN, you had free access, and we were posting this very, I think, unique look into China at the time. Americans had really no idea what life was like on the ground in China. You know, people had no idea that I had some of the, again, as I said, most vibrant, booming cities in the world. And it's a long historic culture, right? And there are great people there, and to be able to show it off in this comedic way was a lot of fun and a great privilege, and was something that really gave me the bug, right, of content creation, building, ideating, filming, editing, directing, putting out content on a weekly basis, and figuring out how to build an audience in still these early days of YouTube and Facebook and social media in general. So yeah, was in China for about 3 or 4 years, and we did that series and had a lot of fun. But by the time 2014 came around, I was like, okay, I think my time here is done. And so that was also the time that Xi was coming to power, President Xi, who's their leader now. And things really flipped sort of at that time. When I was first there, I mean, they had the World Expo, they had the Olympics, they were very open to foreigners coming in, and they pretty much let us do our own thing, right? As foreigners there in China. But then when Xi came to power, the mood changed, right? And yeah, so.
How did it change? Or maybe give us a few examples of what that looks like. What was it, and what did it shift to?
Yeah, and so Shanghai in particular has always been, it's a port city, right? And so, I mean, jazz was a big thing there in the 1920s. You got people who fled Europe, the fled Nazis, they came to Shanghai. So, I mean, it's got this international culture from around the world, and it's a huge party scene, right? And so there is, again, a lot of, like, you wouldn't put that 2 and 2 together, China and party scene, but yeah, Shanghai was that. But when Xi came to power, they started sending cops to the clubs, and they'd pull out 10 foreigners, take them out to the street, clip a snippet of their hair, test it for drugs, and if it was positive, they would kick them out of the country, right? And that was completely unheard of in the years prior to that. So that's just one example of how things just sort of changed on a dime, really. And just the general attitude towards foreigners. China was feeling its oats, right? It felt as if it could stand mano a mano with America, and their media and news pounded that message home to the people to say that, hey, like we're equals, if not better than these Americans over here. So yeah, just the mood in general changed, I think. And it was a good time to pivot back to America and continue with the foundations which I started in Shanghai. So, I mean, throughout this time, that investigative looking into what was wrong with the world in 2009 or so, I mean, it turned me on to Ron Paul, hard money. I was a big gold and silver bug. I thought that, I mean, from reading a lot of things like Stansberry research, they made you think that hyperinflation was around the corner, right? That we were printing all this money and that by 2012, 2013 or whatever, we'd all be spending $50 to buy a sandwich, right? It didn't turn out that way. I mean, there was one of the best bull markets for stocks throughout the 2010s, but a lot of the zero hedge and whatnot that I was reading and consuming heavily at the time, like, there was a lot of black pill sort of content, right? A lot of stuff that was like doom and gloom, and that's economic catastrophe was around the corner.
Can you define black pill content?
Yeah, black pill just means that, like, there is no hope, right? That the doom and gloom is coming and there's not much you can do about it. So either become a prepper or just be nihilistic, right?
Right.
And
that stuff was coming out there. Before you keep going, you had
Yeah.
mentioned that the Chinese had kind of thought that they could go toe to toe with America. That's the content they're pushing out. Are we still there today, or where are we, or where do you see those two powers pushing back and forth to one another, and from a media standpoint, at least?
yeah, I mean, I haven't been there in a long time now to say take in the news reports and whatnot, but I think the general stance of the Chinese government and the type of propaganda that they're pushing out is yeah. I mean, the other thing about China, though, that you have to realize is that they're facing a demographic cliff, right?
Oh, I know.
My generation is relatively large, but they're all like the one child policy from the 80s on. So by the end of this century, their population is going to go from 1.2 billion, 1.3 billion to 600 million, right? It's going to be cut in half.
Can you maybe explain a little about, so at least from how I've studied demographics, the 50-year-olds and the 40-year-olds are the wealthiest, most productive, most creative. That is the heart of your economy. And that is the China population right now. And when that massive block graduates to retirement, there's no one to fill that that void.
Yeah. So their baby boom was, I mean, they had like the Great Leap Forward in the 50s and the 60s, and that was a huge catastrophe, right? They were rapidly transitioning into this communist system, and so they tried collectivizing the farms, and I mean, tens of million, like 30 plus million people died, starved. Like, it was horrible. And it left a huge cultural scar on the country, on the people, and that's one reason I think why they're so willing to put up with the government they have is because this Communist Party, after this great leap forward and after Mao left, they had their baby boom in the 70s and the 80s, right? And Deng Xiaoping came in and he was able to open up the economy and make it more capitalistic, and people were able to get the material wealth that they desired and wanted. And there's been this tacit agreement between the people and the government that as long as the economy keeps improving, we are willing to put up with your corruption and whatever you've got going on over in the behind closed doors in the government area. So in terms of what's happening now with the demographics, yes, there was a big baby boom in the 70s, right, in the 80s, and so those people were able to ride that wave, right, from China going from a closed communist to an open, more capitalistic society. They were able to open the factories. They were able to start from a farming village, move to a factory, start a family, and have the city life that they dreamed of. And now they're able to, they have their one child, right, who's in their 20s, 30s now. And there's this phenomenon going on in China where a lot of people in their 30s have just given up on the rat race, right? It's called the lying flat phenomenon. They don't really want to work 10, 11 hours a day. They don't really see the purpose or the gratification of working an office job. And yeah, it's a big problem. I mean, you see it in Japan. I think you see it in South Korea, and now you're seeing it in China. And one of their answers to this demographic bust and this general malaise in the younger people is automation. They've gone super hard into robots, right? And so it started in the factories, and the factories are highly automated. You've got 3-5 guys running a factory of robots making this stuff now, compared to when it was hundreds of people employed not too long ago. And so they think that when it comes to the service sector, whether it's restaurants or trash cleanup, you'll be able to replace them with robots. That's their plan to deal with this. And I mean, one way that you see it right now in this transition is, I mean, of course, the government is really big. They hire a lot of people. And so you'll have these security forces that are these little old ladies or little old men in their 60s and 70s, because there's no social security there, right? There's no welfare. So they need to have a job until their old age. So now they're employed as security, right? They're the ones who are securing these factories of robots. It's sort of weird. It's sort of dystopian, but that's how they plan to handle this shift.
Yeah, like Jeff Booth says, we live in a deflationary world, and everything is getting cheaper and cheaper. And so, to produce a year-long unit of food for a human is just getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, to where, and I'm not even talking about trash food, just with automation and logistics and everything just screaming in efficiency towards efficiency, it's getting to where you can provide a whole year's worth of whatever energy, food, shelter for a fraction of the cost of what it was 10, 20 years ago. And it's only getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So I grasp at what we will be able to do to earn income against automation and robots and AI, because do things so efficiently. I hope that maybe we can meditate together or do this together. But I'm like, I don't know what's going to be left aside from just helping each other feel good. Maybe relationships.
Yeah, I mean, but sadly, it hasn't really worked out that way, right? I mean, because these deflationary forces have been combated by inflation, by money printing, and it allows very few to really get the vast majority of these productivity gains, while the average person is working just as much, if not more, than they did 50 years ago, right? I mean, John Maynard Keynes, the granddaddy of this fiat system sort of that we have right now, he thought that by now we'd be working 10 hours a week, right? But no, people are working just as much, harder, and they're not able to have the same lifestyle that they had 30, 40 years ago.
Not us Bitcoiners. We're doing fine. Our Bitcoin we bought a few years ago is making it to where we can do things like this that maybe not a whole lot, but it's part of a passion project. I know my Bitcoin has allowed me to not work for the last 13 months and create the Bitcoin Daily Show and think long-term, have a what do they call it? A low time preference, where when I make money again, it's going to be something that has built a lot of momentum. It's going to be something I deeply care about, and it's going to be well thought out. It's not going to be rushed because I got a bill to pay next week, which is the first part of my life. And the thing is, that opportunity is open to everyone real time right now that wants to just exit the fiat currency and get into Bitcoin, especially if you can endure one cycle. If you can just endure one cycle, you're there. And I think that transition is coming, which is why I love the work that you're doing and the content creators are doing. Because to me, that's the most powerful message, is to step into a world where you now gain all these efficiency increases flow straight into you. And Bitcoin reprices everything in this capital efficiency and everything else other way that we're watching things become more efficient. The Bitcoiners, their benefit is immediate. I mean, it literally is immediate, and it's reflected in the price. And I know it's kind of volatile right there at the margins and stuff, but like I said, if you can endure a cycle, all these efficiency increases come to you. But I did want to say a little bit about the Chinese. It seems like the American tactic or strategy of just unleashing, and for the most part, aside from the censorship, staying out of the way of its creators is just going to be difficult for China to deal with. Because do you find that they more or less stand in the way or censor their creators versus how we're a little bit more of a free market on the creation side?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, since I got there in 2010 or so, I mean, they banned YouTube, they banned Facebook, Google was banned, and they made alternatives. They made their WeChat, they made their Douyin, which is their version of TikTok, and those things are heavily censored, right? I mean, it's really concerning. I mean, especially what WeChat became. It's their everything app, right? I mean, you order food on it. It's your Uber app. It's your social credit score, right? If you say bad things on the internet, you will get docked. If you jaywalk in a major city, the facial recognition cameras will pick it up and they will dock your credit score on your phone, right? And if it goes too low, you can't buy plane tickets, you can't get train tickets. People don't want to work with you. They'll even if you have a low enough score, they'll warn people around you, even if you don't know them, that you're there. Like, don't be around this person with a low credit score. It's horrifying, and one of the reasons why I'm glad to have gotten out. I really hope this country doesn't go in that direction. I think you see pushes towards that, and then the people are able to fight back a little bit. It's
scary stuff. And it's not just, you don't even have to say bad things about someone you don't like. You could just empower the people in the direction you want them to go.
Yeah.
So you could maybe make loans cheaper for the population that you want to go, and then just give them more access to. So what do they do when they throttle your account back? So let's say if they don't like, Bitcoin news, they just throttle your algorithm back to where you get no outreach.
Oh yeah.
So they're really not outwardly saying Bitcoin news is bad. You're just irrelevant. Because
yeah. You just completely
you don't realize it. It's like totally undercover of darkness. And so that's another way to accomplish the same thing: make irrelevant the people that are your enemies of the state, and the friends of the state. They say one thing and it gets blasted to every account out there. So how do you compete with that? I think that's where things like Nostr are critical to start building on. And I'm guilty of not doing enough proof of work in Nostr, but we're going to get there as well. Is that something y'all are on and pushing towards?
Yeah, we're on Nostr. I mean, admittedly, we definitely post more on Twitter, but we definitely have daily content going up on Nostr, and I want to make that a priority, especially going on into the second half of the year. I think there's a lot of great developments going on over there, whether it be spaces or streaming, or just being able to send sats to content that you like, right? And I think it's super cool now that the top donation, top zap to each post, you get to put a little comment there, right? So if you've given the most to a certain piece of content, you'll have your top line be read by other people that see that content. So I think it's a powerful way to create stuff and be rewarded for making powerful content. And that's what we're doing, right?
Yeah, and it's I think this should be more of a meritocracy where the best content wins, the most compelling content wins, and then people have the freedom to choose what content they want to follow, and not have all these people pulling levers of what you get to see and the decisions you get to make. And I think Nostr is that kind of final frontier of freedom for content, to be able to just consume what you want unedited. And I think Musk is kind of holding down the fort as some benevolent dictator that we hope remains.
Yeah, I don't know. The jury's out on him for me. I think there are just as many pros as cons with him and his past and his intentions. And
tell us more about that. What's your take on that? I'm of course, I was an early investor in Tesla, and I believe SpaceX, and so he's got me on a lot of ways that I almost think he walks on water. But at the same time, God, that's a lot of power to be holding so centralized. I mean, he is one bullet or one, decision away from just being a massive problem, having so much centralized authority over the content here on X. And this might be the last bastion of centralized freedom, before. And Nostr is just so in its infancy. It's not ready to take on, at least from what I understand, it's not even close to being ready to take on any of the big major current players.
Yeah, I mean, as I was saying with WeChat, the everything app in China, right? And like that's how they get you. Once you're in that fenced in area, you can't really interact with, like, you can, even the street vendors, they only take WeChat Pay, right? I mean, it's cash is really just not really used much in China anymore. And you're sort of looked at with a side eye if you do try to use it. And then we see Musk, he wants to make X the everything app, right? He's getting these money transmitter licenses, and I think he's got in over 37 plus states now, right? And so is that the direction that he wants to take the app? I mean, that's what this new CEO says, right? That's the vision. That's why she joined on board, is to make it the everything app. And I mean, if you listen to Matt Odell, he was huge on Twitter, of course, and he closed down his account. He's on Nostr only, and he thinks that Elon Musk and these blue checks and the verification in order to get paid to be monetized on X. I mean, it's creating this system slowly but surely, giving you the little carrots here and there to get you further drawn in, and then one day you might wake up and we have this the same WeChat for the West in X. And I mean, I hope not. I mean, it's been really amazing to be on Twitter this last year and a half or so, especially with Musk taking over and just seeing different voices being amplified or having the ability to speak has been very refreshing. But at the end of the day, as someone who studied history, I mean, the powers that be, they play both sides, right? They have to. And as soon as you think that you're on the good guy side, well, you got to be careful, because there's probably somebody else pulling strings behind to make you feel that way, And so, yeah, I mean, could it all be one massive psyop to get us to now speak freely and really expose ourselves on social media? And so it's all recorded. Who knows? Maybe. But
Right.
While we do have this platform, I think it's important to talk about the things that are important to us and try to just get that next person on the margins into Bitcoin, into freedom, into self-sovereignty, and exposed to the ideas that have helped change my life for the better, and hopefully can help change others.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I guess what I'll say about Musk is I think he's good enough for us to do the hard work and give birth to Bitcoin and Nostr. And I don't think he's going to stop that. And I think he'll at least hold the fort down for at least another 20 years. And if we can't get our side of the equation done in 20 years, then I think we're the problem.
If we've got 20 years of free runway, I have no doubts that we can do it. Do we have those 20 years, right?
Yeah.
That's the real question, I think. Yeah.
So he's 50. I imagine he'll be tweeting until at least he's 70. I mean, look at Trump. He's still tweeting at his age.
I don't know. Elon's got to work out, dude. He's got to get in shape if he wants to keep up his pace for the next 20, 30 years.
I'm hoping he comes up with some Neuralink thing that just kind of makes
that concerns me too, though. I'm not cool like that. That weirds me out. I mean, but that's his general philosophy when it comes to AI, right? He's like, we're not going to be able to beat this thing, so we've got to merge with it. And that's what Neuralink is. And I don't know. I'm not taking the chip in the head, dude. That's a step too far for me. No, thank you.
I see that point, and I'll just say that I'm not really for or against. I'm just at the point where I'm like, am I going to allow myself? And here's my struggle: am I going to allow myself to be deemed irrelevant to where I look like an ape compared to someone with Neuralink? To me, I don't see the difference between Neuralink and me with an iPhone and an African without an iPhone. Without the connection to leverage Twitter to digitally acquire attention and electricity, it's like, is there that big of a difference between someone with no electricity and no internet and me, someone with Neuralink? It's like that poor guy without electricity and the internet, like access to the world, he is infinite, like several orders of magnitude in his opportunity and his potential. And I think Neuralink is going to give a similar advantage to those. And so then it's just a matter of, how do you want to go out, or do you relinquish that efficiency increase to the people that are open to it? But then, man, that's a black box you're opening right there.
No, it is hard. And I mean, and I do get your point that, I mean, are we pretty much already cyborgs if we're spending 6+ hours a day interacting on the internet, like with the hive mind? Is just the Neuralink just the next logical step? But I do think there is something to say for bodily sovereignty, right? I mean, if I really wanted to, I could still throw my phone out and go try to make it in the woods. Whereas if I've got a chip in my head, I risk if I could take that out myself, or the access that they have without me knowing, right? If there is a chip there. So yeah, I think we are going to face a lot of really weird and hard questions in the next 10, 15 years as we reach this singularity, as Kurzweil has called it out for the last 40 years or so.
I got a crazy one for you. What if they have access to your memory? What does that do to the seed phrases?
Yeah, right.
You've seen everyone, even though they might have it in steel and they might not have it memorized, they've seen it.
You've seen it.
And so,
yeah,
operational security might have to change.
How is there? There's no privacy.
Your seed phrase.
No, man, no, not for me. Not for me. But I think that Bitcoin gives you the option to choose what kind of life you want, right? Yeah, I mean, a lot of people in 2020 had to make a decision that they didn't want to make because they didn't have the financial freedom to do so, right? I mean, they felt as if they couldn't risk losing their job, and they had to abide by the rules, quote unquote, if they wanted to maintain their lifestyle. So yeah, I think those type of questions are going to keep popping up, and there's really no running away from it. It's a matter of being straight with yourself and being at peace with yourself, and questioning as to what your true beliefs are, what your foundation is, and drawing lines that you won't cross. I think boundaries define you, really. I mean, if you have no boundaries, you have no personhood, right? You have no self. So each one of us needs to decide what's the line for us.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we take inventory of who our enemies are and what the problems we face, but every once in a while we should take also inventory of what we got going for us. I think Bitcoin being a major issue with centralized authority, Nostr also being a sleeper of centralized authority, 8 billion free thinking minds, at least. Well, we'd like to think they're free thinking. They have the ability to think freely at some point, and they can now start to coordinate together. I think what SpaceX is doing with Starlink is a critical component of just having connectivity, and just the overall efficiencies in 70 plus sovereign nations, that something like El Salvador can just boom, there it is. And then most non-Americans don't realize that America pretty much operates as 50 sovereign nations under one umbrella. That we've seen laws and stuff that just make one state look totally different from another, and culturally as well. And so, I think there are a lot of community. And then what about the digital sovereign nations like Bitcoiners that almost operate outside the physical world in commerce and ideas, and with Nostr now behind them? Like these are all things that are going to be, if I was a centralized authority right now, knowing what I know about Bitcoin and Nostr and what's happening at the front line, I would be panicking. I would be in full on panic mode because I don't know how they stop Bitcoin. I don't know what they do about it.
Or you'd be trying to infiltrate it, right? And so, I mean, I think
you mean like, make people buy it through your mechanisms? Is that what?
Yeah, on ramps, off ramps, even just thought influencers in the space too, right? The direction in which it goes. Is Bitcoin just a store of value, or is it a medium of exchange too? Is that important? Should we focus on that?
What do you think?
I think in the way that money develops, I think store of value is the foundational level, and then it's used as a medium of exchange, and then it's a unit of account. But Michael Saylor, he has to say certain things due to his position as a CEO on a publicly traded company. But he's very clear to draw the line that this is a store of value. This is not a currency to be traded, right? He's like, people buy buildings in Manhattan as a store of value. They don't go to the Starbucks and try to pay with a fraction of their building, right? And so while I agree that if Bitcoin isn't a store of value, then it has no use as a medium of exchange, yes, but we can't lose sight of that. I think a lot of the freedom functions of Bitcoin, its use for sovereign individuals, is all dependent on it being a medium of exchange, us being able to transact between the two of us without a third-party middleman, right? The fact that there's nobody there seeing, watching over it, or deciding who I can send my Bitcoin to makes it revolutionary, makes it completely different than the system that we have now. And I think that's one thing that if the powers that be want to maintain the system as it is, they want to belittle that aspect of Bitcoin and try to make it not cool, not sexy. Store of value, number go up, just sit and hold it. Don't use it. I like the opportunities to be able to spend Bitcoin, especially in places that I believe are with fellow Bitcoiners, right? Whether it's buying a documentary movie ticket to go see the BTC Pay Server documentary in New York, or going to PubKey in New York and spending Bitcoin there, or going to conferences and buying art or merch, clothes with Bitcoin. That circular economy is pivotal, and an essential part of Bitcoin's future. If we're all just sitting and hodling, then it loses that revolution.
So, and I'd love to continue this conversation. So it's like Bitcoin, the way fiat dilutes the power that you have in all your long-term savings is devastating for your generational wealth, for your mental health of constantly getting poorer and poorer and having to outpace inflation. And so, yeah, store of value, that's the problem it solves. Okay, but you live real time and need to spend and you create with your wealth. And so when you are creating and you need monetary power behind your creation to make it relevant and expand it and scale it, that's where the spending will never go away. You spend real time because you go buy food today and you drink beer today and you have coffee today and you invest in a company today. So if they can just stop that spending, they've cut you off from the creative capacity and the power that your money behind you. Yes, you're wealthy, but you can't spend. So store of value, great. 10 years from now, you're one of the wealthiest guys in the world, but you can't spend it. You're just wealthy, or you have to spend it in a certain way. So I think it's just two different types of problems. And I think Bitcoin does uniquely solve both. I think Michael Saylor's head is in the store value camp because that's where he's at. That's where he's positioning himself. But I heard a compelling case. Natalie interviewed Jeff Booth not too long ago, and he really explains how important means of exchange is. I haven't put a lot of thought behind unit of account and the implications of it all. But when you've really exited the system, you really just stop measuring things in terms of fiat. And I think that's where that's kind of born is now we measure everything in Bitcoin. That's kind of the unit of account. I don't see a lot of content coming out around that. Like people will mention it.
Yeah, I mean that's the last stages, right? That's when Bitcoin has absorbed the monetary premium of all the different assets in the world, whether it's real estate or different financialized products, and it's stable, right? You really can't price things in Bitcoin on a general scale unless it's somewhat stable, right? So that comes later.
It needs to get. When does that stability come? Is that 10 trillion, 100 trillion, somewhere around there? If you had to guess.
Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin would have to 100x from here to be 100 trillion, right? And I mean, I think I saw a chart
Gold's pretty
yesterday.
stable, and it's 13 trillion. Gold's pretty stable. So you would, and this is just me guessing because gold can't move as fast,
Mm-hmm.
but gold's pretty stable at 13 trillion. So you would say, I think that's where the stability would really start to hit around maybe 600,000 a Bitcoin to
Mm-hmm.
6 billion a Bitcoin. That's where that stability starts to say, hey, this is not only is it store of value, but man, it's a stable asset that we can now transact in without, not being able to pay your bills because it dropped. Your $600 now is worth 400 in a
Mm-hmm.
week.
Mm-hmm.
When do you think that stops roughly?
Yeah, I mean, I think global wealth is around $455 trillion right now, right? And so to get to 1% of that, we've got to be at 45 trillion. So as a market cap for Bitcoin. And so that's around $2 million a Bitcoin, right? So probably around that level, I think when Bitcoin's around $2 million, you're going to see a lot of things priced in Bitcoin. I think
Yeah.
people, yeah, that's probably a fair thing.
Yeah, and it is a globally recognized currency that because it has so many ways to off and on ramp this thing, and it's acceptable and it's easy to get into Bitcoin, to get out of Bitcoin. It's so easily done by anyone that's connected to the internet with a smartphone or anything like that. And so I think it can do that. It has the ability to do it. It's just a matter of, to me, I've always said Bitcoin's life depends on how quickly education can just get an understanding, can leap into people's minds.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I decided to put all of my energy into kind of what me and you are doing, is like, it's time for us to go do our work, because without the work that we're doing being done, it's the best kept secret on planet Earth. That it's like the cure to cancer. We're all dying from cancer. We just need to get it out into the heads. But so when you say we're being infiltrated or could be infiltrated, maybe describe some of your concerns of what would that look like?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was just listening to a podcast this morning while I was at the gym, and it's the latest What Bitcoin Did with Mark Goodwin of Bitcoin Magazine and Whitney Webb, who's a great investigative journalist. And so, of course, Whitney has gone deep into Jeffrey Epstein and just the financial ties of the Clintons and all that, and how a lot of quote unquote conspiratorial content, right? But it's all laid out there in facts and true. So what they were talking about was based around the idea of the Bitcoin dollar, right? In 1971, the U.S. cut off the gold window. Of course, they stopped backing the dollar with gold, and it's just been a pure fiat currency since then. Inflation took off in the 70s, and Henry Kissinger went over to Saudi Arabia, made a deal that said, we'll provide you with defense if you only accept dollars for your oil. And so now all the countries in the world have had to use dollars primarily in order to obtain oil, and oil powers the world, right? So the dollar has been de facto backed by oil since the 1970s, when we got off the gold standard. And so now we're seeing Saudi Arabia being willing to take other currencies such as yuan for oil. Our grip on the Middle East is weakening. We had to evacuate Afghanistan, of course. But there still is a need by the US government to be able to issue a lot of debt and have that debt be absorbed somewhere. So they were talking on this podcast that instead of the petrodollar, the Bitcoin dollar, right? Bitcoin being a place to absorb all of this inflation, and it facilitating the dollarization of the global South, right? And so whether you're in Argentina or Lebanon, any place that has really bad inflation, they, more than Bitcoin right now, they want Tether, they want stable coins, right? They want a medium of exchange that is stable, that will keep its value on a day-to-day basis, because their fiat currency devalues rapidly. So what they were saying on this podcast was that maybe, especially in the last couple of years, Bitcoin's been identified as a way to absorb all of this inflation, right? And so now we've got Tether. There's $113 billion worth of Tether floating around there, and they take in dollars, and then Tether goes and buys U.S. Treasuries. And now you've got Paul Ryan, a former congressman, of course, saying that these stable coins are great. This could be the answer to our debt problem. China doesn't want to buy our debt like they used to. Japan is about to dump all of our debt in order to prop up their yen, because the yen is rapidly devaluing. Who's going to be the next giant person or entity to buy this debt? And usually it's been nation states, but the nation states aren't wanting as much. And so now Tether has more US Treasuries than Germany. Germany is the fourth largest economy in the world, and Tether has more treasuries than them, and they have more Bitcoin than Germany does too. So I don't know what's going on in Germany. They don't have their nuclear anymore. They don't have their Bitcoin. They don't have
who is Tether? Like, describe that to someone that just doesn't understand what Tether is. Like that's not the U.S. government. Like,
no, it's a private company. It's employs, I think, less than 50 people, right? And they're sitting on $113 billion worth of stable coins. So the way that it works is you take your US dollars, you send it to them, and they will give you the same exact amount equivalent in Tether. And Tether is, you can trade it instantly, right? You can exchange it for Bitcoin on exchange. You can send it the way you send Bitcoin to another wallet. And
Bitcoin do you have?
Sorry, what?
How much Bitcoin do they have?
I think they have in excess of 40 or 50,000 Bitcoin. They've got a couple of $1 billion worth of Bitcoin. Yeah, for sure. Crazy. So yeah, and I mean, for people who are in places experiencing hyperinflation or just really bad inflation, it's a necessity, right? They want to be able to have their work stored in a medium of exchange that keeps its value, and Tether allows them to do that without a bank account, right? All you need is an app, just like with Bitcoin.
Where are they based?
They're offshore. I think in the Bahamas, Bermuda, something like that, you know. They're headed by this guy, Paolo Andrino. He's this Italian guy. He's a true Bitcoiner. I've spoken with him in person. Seems like a really nice, genuine guy. But this Tether stablecoin system might be the off ramp for the U.S. government to perpetuate the U.S. dollar system by finding this large buyer of its debt that wants to dollarize places of the world that aren't using dollars on a day-to-day basis at this moment, right?
Do you know his Bitcoin strategy? Like, obviously he's acquiring Bitcoin to provide stability and take advantage of the Bitcoinization of the planet. What is his Bitcoin strategy? Why would he buy and hold Bitcoin if he's a Bitcoiner? I mean, what's the obvious?
So they've taken these dollars, right? And then they need to do something with them because people will also exchange their Tether for dollars. So they always need to have the same, like, enough dollars to back up the Tether that they have. And so they will invest the dollars that they take in treasury bonds, buy US debt and get a return on it. They will buy Bitcoin, which has appreciated in value over the years as they've done it. And they're buying gold too, right? So they have attestations that lay out their balance sheet of all the things that they buy with the $100 billion plus dollars that have come into them. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty crazy. They're able to take in dollars from people, buy US debt, get a 3% return on that, and then turn that into Bitcoin, right? So they've got a pretty nice system going on, right? And for a company of 30 people to be sitting on $113 billion worth of value here, it's pretty crazy per capita.
So what's keeping them from just running off with all the money?
It's trust, right? I mean, you have to trust them. You have to trust them. Like, you have to trust Tether. I mean, Tether they do work with authorities in different countries. Say if there's I mean, that was a big deal back in last fall when October 7th happened, and Elizabeth Warren was saying that Bitcoin and these things are used for terrorism. They were looking at Tether, and they were trying to call out Tether and say, "Hey, you guys are helping to fund terrorism." But Tether is very willing and open to working with the governments to try to, which you could look as a good thing or a bad thing, right? I mean, in terms of financial sovereignty. So yeah, they definitely are tied in with the whole system now. They're a huge player. Again, they are a bigger treasury consumer than Germany now. So they can move markets. And
Are there any others?
there is Circle, which is, I mean, Tether you could sort of look at as the offshore punk version, and Circle is more the Americanized stable coin, but it's much smaller. I think it's probably a quarter or a third of the size of Tether. And but now they've got a euro stable coin too that they just came out with as well. So these stable coins are spreading. They do provide a use for people around the world who are experiencing inflation in their own currencies. And again, you don't need a bank account in order to hold them. So there are some benefits, but it is perpetuating this dollar hegemony, the system that woke me up in 2008, 2009, is saying that this system is messed up. And by buying treasuries and being a huge buyer of them, they are keeping it going. So
what's Bitcoin's pushback against this? Like, how does Bitcoin, or does Bitcoin eventually move on to solving that problem they're solving as well? Is that when means of exchange takes their place when it comes of age?
I think every fiat currency has a shelf life, right? And the dollar will cease to be the king fiat at some point in the future. However, by the dollarization, quote unquote, of Bitcoin, like it's by having things like Tether purchase all this debt, I mean, you're perpetuating that. You're elongating the lifespan of the dollar. So, and the dollar system. Do I think that the world is ready to get up the dollar and go onto a Bitcoin standard? No, absolutely not. But it's all about time spans, right? And how quickly can we create a more free and fair financial system for the world? The sooner the better, but instantaneously probably wouldn't be too good.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we're building so much. There's so much. For those of you not in the process of building the future we're trying to build, if you start, I encourage you to start. There's so much work to be done. Oh my gosh, there's so much work to be done on education, on the hardware devices, on all the different legal structures around it. It's like a buffet. It's all you can eat if you want to come create. It's super early, and to me, it's exciting to be a part of. And maybe you can speak about this, but I can't brag enough about the people in Bitcoin that are working there. If this was a population, you always hear about the Americans and their entrepreneurial spirit, and maybe the hard work, the work ethic of some of the Asian countries, and maybe the resources of some of these other countries. Man, if Bitcoin was a nation of people, holy cow, it is a star-studded nation.
Yeah.
Maybe you can speak on that a little bit about the type of people you found in Bitcoin.
Yeah, it attracts some of the best, some of the brightest, right? And we all sort of have that streak in us of valuing liberty, wanting to be free, not wanting to see others be under the spell of a system that they have no influence over and that rules their lives, right? We think that Bitcoin is sort of that wedge that can crack open the door and fix a lot of the problems that we see today. So Bitcoin has given hope to a lot of really smart people who were able to identify the problems of the old system, but didn't see a way out of it until they found Bitcoin. Because yeah, I mean, I think that is a general problem with being intelligent is that you can see what is wrong, right? And you can ruminate on it, and it can spin in your head, and it can demoralize you. But once you are able to see Bitcoin for what it is, and the how it can affect so many different levels of society, it gives you that hope, and it gives you that energy to fight back the fears that you might have had of an old system dying, and be able to focus on a new one that is being born. Right. So yeah, it's there's a lot of great people from around the world, and I think our team at Bitcoin News embodies that.
Yeah, and I really want to support what you just said, that if there are times where you just look down at what you don't have, and you can follow into this where you think you're just lacking, and you don't have a lot of opportunity, and you get depressed about how little you are. But there's a moment where you can shift and look up at the opportunity of what you could be, and you can create, and it's infinite in that way. And so sometimes when you get sucked into this fear-based mainstream content creation, you do get kind of down and out, and you miss an opportunity every day that you let tick by to not step in and create really endless possibilities out here. And so I would just encourage everybody to just, turn away from all that stuff and just start building and start creating, and your life will change. And Bitcoin to me is just one of the many vehicles, like Nostr, that it's just a tool you'll use to create. And there's so many good creators out here. But yeah, if you let it, man, that depressing side, you'll just look back, and for a year you've just been kind of scrolling on the doom scroll.
Yep.
Haven't done much. And I don't think that's a good existence for humans. I think we are at our best when we are creating. And when you meet creators like yourself, you see it. You see that energy and that kind of spark, and it's all the difference. And I think that's where man should thrive. That's where man thrives. And I hope that what you're doing, and with the Bitcoin community, we're just trying to grow that and share it. Well, look, man, I super appreciate all you taking the time with me today. I feel like there's so much more that I could talk about with you, because everything was just like what's going on. And I feel like I could check back with you in a week or a month, and you could tell me what's going on then, because there's so much that happens in Bitcoin. Yeah. It's amazing, the news cycle here. I mean, look at where we were just a month ago. And maybe we can end on this. Did you ever think that we would be politically where we are with Bitcoin a year ago? I personally, I thought we wouldn't get to where we are politically for another cycle at least. And it almost happened overnight.
Yeah, it was interesting. Last year at BTC Prague in June 2023, we had the opportunity to interview Michael Saylor, and that's sort of how we framed the interview. Was like, how do you think Bitcoin will play into the election in 2024? And Saylor sort of called it. He said, you're going to need to be pro Bitcoin if you want to win. And just to see all these people in the last couple of weeks just flip their tune, right? I mean, Trump was clearly anti-Bitcoin when he was president last time.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
And now he's saying, Jamie Dimon, who was just in April in front of Congress testifying, saying that Bitcoin was pointless and is used just for criminals. He flipped his tune, according to Trump. Mark Cuban said that he'd rather have bananas than Bitcoin a couple years ago, back in 2017. He just came out and said that Bitcoin could be a global currency if the way of the dollar and everything keeps going. So, yeah, and I mean, I think Balaji lays this out really well, that we're divided into this red and blue tribe, right?
Who is that, Balaji?
Balaji, yeah. Do you know him?
No.
He was a former CTO of Coinbase. Really brilliant guy, definitely. He's the guy who made the $1 million bet that Bitcoin would hit $1 million within like 90 days. Yeah. But yeah, he lays out that we're leaving this red and blue paradigm and shifting towards a green and orange political paradigm. where the two sides are going to people are going to switch from where they are and find these new camps where instead of conservative and progressive, you've got the green, which is the dollar-based sort of statist, the pro-war, the greenback cannot lose its supremacy type of stance, versus the entrepreneurial, self-sovereign Bitcoiner other camp, right? And you can see how people from both sides of Republican and Democrat would switch. Like, there's plenty of pro-war Democrats, right, who would go over to Team Green, and there's plenty of self-sovereign Republicans who would ditch the wars of America to go to be on Team self-sovereignty. So yeah, I think the political map is being redefined as in front of our very eyes, and now it's clearer than ever that Bitcoin is a part of that. So,
oh my gosh, I could do a whole story just on that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're coming up at an hour and 20, so I want to respect your time, but I'd love to do this again. Gosh, just that last topic alone, I'd love to do an episode just on that.
Yeah.
And then if you don't mind, I'd love to reach out to Luke and maybe just, help give him some exposure to our audience, and just find out what he's doing and what he's creating, because I really love what you're doing over there. So keep it up.
Are you going to be in Nashville?
Oh yeah, I'll be there. I'll be at the booth for meetups. I actually run 3 meetups here in Louisiana, and I'm trying to put together to where I bring socially, not necessarily with all the vendors and stuff, but just bring people socially to a really fun city in New Orleans, and have that social layer kind of built among Bitcoin meetups, but also creators. Like, I really want to make an event just for creators to come in and get to know one another and kind of experience each other. So I will be at the Bitcoin meetup table for most of the event, but I'd love to come see y'all. If y'all are around, just let me know.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be there.
We'll be there. Well, I'll see you in here in a couple of weeks, and thank you for your time.
Cheers, man. Thanks for having me.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right. That was Rob Wallace with bitcoinnews.com. You can see the amazing stuff they're doing, their international team growing, fellow Bitcoiner that's just building that social layer, building the news layer. I met Rob early on when I was working, trying to build up the Bitcoin Daily along with all of my other hosts. And he was an early supporter. We always tried to just post one another's stuff. Of course, he's much larger than us, but I can't believe they got their hands on bitcoinnews.com. What a great brand that a good Bitcoiner was able to grab a hold of. So again, I'm Craig LeBlanc, founder of the Bitcoin Daily Show. I'm one of 12 hosts, 8 shows running 8 to 10 a.m. every day on X. We're also producing other types of content. Some of our hosts have written books, like Deanna and Joel have written a book called Shells to Satoshis. We've also got Mars, who's been helping out produce a lot of memes. We've got Brad, that's owner of Minor Masteries. He'll be there at the conference along with all of us. Please come by. If you see me or any of the other hosts, please walk up to us, introduce yourself. I'd love to meet y'all in person. Most of us will be in Nashville. We've got some people even coming from Canada to come in. TJ, he's our Saturday host. And so a lot of great people building the Bitcoin Daily brand. Please reach out to us if you would like to contribute or like to join the team or have an idea. We're open to making this really a community effort of building really strong Bitcoin content and getting it out there and supporting the content creators that we can. Even if you're not like officially part of the team, reach out, especially to Weston. Tuesdays, we highlight content creators. And so if you're a content creator, reach out to Weston. He goes under BT Cosmonaut as his X Twitter handle, and come on to the show and tell us what you're doing, how you got there, how you create. And we love to highlight our content creators, or really just anytime, come up to the stage and speak. Again, the show runs every day, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on X, live spaces. You have a lot of audience participation. And then if you'd like to do an interview with me or any of the other hosts, just reach out to us. We'd love to have you on, maybe do a little more in-depth. And as we kind of explore this video content creation that I'm kind of pioneering over here we'd love to support you. So again, I'm Craig LeBlanc with the Bitcoin Daily Show. Love you guys. Let's go bring Bitcoin to the rest of the planet. Thanks. Bye.